welcome to this exciting webinar. And hopefully I remember how to operate Zoom. And yeah, so this is Julius and John Speed. And you know, I'm just sort of following convention here, but I've noticed whenever I'm in meetings with you, people always refer to you as John Speed.
That's right. Yeah, I actually go by my first and middle name together. My dad was John, my grandfather was John. And so friends and family, colleagues all call me John Speed to this day.
So you're actually an early example of these naming collision attacks that you sometimes see.
Yeah, I'm something like a walking, breathing typo-squatting attack.
Exactly. Yeah, so yeah, just a bit about us. So I'm here at MergeBase, which is an SCA solution, software composition analysis, and John Speed Meyers is at Chainguard, which is maybe more focused on the container side of things and container images. Okay, and here's a little background about how we met. So we worked together on a research paper here, a small little paper, 4-pager. Interesting paper because I was frustrated in my area with you know, a lot of people will claim that, you know, open source everywhere, and a lot of people know this, right? That, you know, like the average software systems today, the vast majority of it is coming from open source libraries, right? But these claims, and a lot of security companies, you know, are backing these claims and, you know, saying based on our data and our own research, you know, yeah, you know, 80–90% of software is made of open source. But unfortunately, there's no like reproducible, speaking of reproducibility, there's no like, yeah, reproducible, transparent methodologies here backing these claims. So yeah, this is really fun. Do you want to speak to this a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, Java Julius, our expert in all things Java, whipped up a really neat tool, OSS Contains, that allowed us to empirically measure for Java code bases how much of it really is open source. And what's neat is we also had another collaborator on here. You can see Albert, who's at Ford, who provided another key ingredient for this paper, which was access to industrial code bases, and plus some other code bases that we found that are available for study and analysis. And we were able to measure, well, how much in these Java industrial code bases really is open source. And I think the results are interesting if congruent with conventional wisdom, which is that upwards of 80%, sometimes getting close to 99.9% of modern industrial code bases are open source. That doesn't mean necessarily all those open source code in there is being used, but if you're just counting lines, it is mostly open source. So I thought it was a pretty interesting paper. Matches conventional wisdom, but we did it in a way that is transparent and others can build on and replicate.
Yeah, but taking it from there, I mean, my next slide here is really boring, right? Which is, what was our model of a software system? Like, you know, if you're going to count lines of code in a software system, right? Well, what is a software system, right? And so, like, this was essentially our model, right? Like, you have an application. You know, you ask your developers or whoever is, you know, is that the application? Yeah, that's the application. Okay, let's point our tool at it. And then our tool was only Java centric, Java only, right? So it could only measure the parts of the application that were Java. Here, I'll just actually maybe run the tool for a second, just show everyone an example of this. In the paper, sort of I'd say sort of the flagship app that we pointed it at was Jira. Right, we just downloaded Jira and pointed the tool out. Maybe I'll just do that right now too. I think it takes only like 20–30 seconds to point that thing at Java. You can watch me just sort of mad scramble on my computer here. So it was called OSS Contains.
I'm impressed with my coding skills. Go for it.
Here we go. What's it? It contains OSS or OSS contains? I'll just go to MergeBase. So it's a public repository, public tool. Anyone can use this. See if I can find it here. Where are you?
Oh, you should have searched, definitely. That was
Yeah.
an error.
Am I in as, yeah, contains. There we go, contains OSS. I'm gonna just clone that puppy. And then now that we've got it, you can run it against itself. That's always fun. So you just go like that. That's the tool. If you run it with no arguments, it complains. You know, it's like, excuse me, you didn't point me at anything. Let's just run it at itself. How much open source does contains OSS itself contain? Right. And so then here it's run and it's saying that it itself is 96.6% open source. And then it gives you a little breakdown on the names of the classes. It's saying, well, you know, you had this com.mergebase.strings namespace here, and it had 3,500 lines of code. And then you had all these Java assist lines of code. And they added up to significantly more, right? And so you can see like 3,500 were coming from the com.mergebase namespace, 101,000 were coming from this Java assist namespace. And we have encoded in it stored in it sort of a listing of all names that you can find on Maven Central. And so any name you can find on Maven Central is sort of presumed to be open source, since, you know, if you can download it, at least the distribution clause on copyright, you know, normally copyright, all rights reserved, no right to distribute. Well, if it's on Maven Central, you're allowed to distribute. I'm going way too deep into the weeds on this. Just a bad habit here. So let's point this thing at Jira. You know,
We need more Java though, so this is good.
Yeah, like most people, right? I have, I believe I have Jira just hanging around here. Is it Jira? There you are. Oh, and oh yeah, so Jira, I mean, here's a complication, right? Jira, after you install it, it wants a home directory and it wants its sort of binary directory, but there's going to be code in both of those. So, I mean, if you're a researcher or end user using this tool, you're going to have to decide, am I going to run OSS contains against this directory or both of them? So here, I think I'll just use it against both. And here we go. And then, I mean, it's going to barf out so much stuff that I'm going to just pipe it to a JSON file. Drum roll. Should have ran the time command in front of that, eh? Just so we could see how long it took.
You need to add a cute little bar that shows some sort of progress. I've learned that that's a UX trick people use to make you like your tool more. You know, nothing's different about the tool, but if you give me the progress bar, I feel happier as a user.
Oh, it's saying chat is disabled. Someone mentioned that. Okay, let's turn on chat while we're waiting. Okay. But yeah, a UX progress trick. Answer live, done. Okay, how do I turn on chat? I will see if I can figure out how chat. Hosts and panelists. So that thing's done now. More. End meeting. Pause, stop, raise hand. Disable. I'm just not seeing an option here to turn on chat, but the QA is good. So yeah, just use the Q&A section, eh? Okay. So I don't have a progress bar because I'm a bad Java developer. I'm not like a friendly front-end JavaScript developer thinking of the end users. But let's see, what is Jira's, and this is Jira, what version of Jira is like 8.20. And we are saying, oh, I made a mistake. Oh, okay, I'll have to do this again. So that's sort of a sad mistake. the database of all the names that belong to what we call open source are in this file, and it needs that file to be in the current directory. So, oops, let's try that again. So, and then I need to go, yeah, home, Julius, Jira, and that was the directory we wanted to scan. That was tragic. Okay, yeah, and so you see it actually took the database of names and it says, okay, from that file, we're saying 147,000 fully qualified class names are considered open source. Anything that's outside of that set is going to be considered not open source.
Hey, Julius, we have a question here about, could OSS contains be used as a basic SBOM generating tool?
I mean, I have my, the short answer is no. The long answer, or the silly answer, is because I actually recently was playing with a whole bunch of SBOM generators, and it turns out people that have written SBOM generators have very funny ideas of what SBOM is and should be, right? So like an SBOM in my mind should be a listing, an accurate listing of the components that make up the system. But other people, for example, I found this tool that, I mean, afterwards I did email them and they said, oh no, we were just playing around with the SPDX format. It was meant to just be, can we articulate this information in the SPDX format? But it was the list of vulnerabilities. It wasn't the list of components, but it was articulated in the SPDX format. So you'd think it was an SBOM, but yeah, I mean, so, I mean, in this case, I'm kind of saying like, sure, you can put SBOM formats and tags and JSON attributes around it and say it's an SBOM, but this tool would not be very good for that. Because it's really just trying to give you an answer like, is this open source, yes or no? It's not trying to say, hey, what actual components are these? And okay, yeah, that's a better number. So based on the tool saying that that version of Jira is 78.4% open source.
I remember when we did that analysis, we were actually surprised and interested at, in some sense, how low that number is. It really shows that Jira has a lot of code in it, that it doesn't simply come from open source components, but represents substantial amounts of development.
Yeah, and that I mean, in a way, that becomes their edge, right? That becomes their competitive edge. Yeah, a lot of stuff happened in that paper that I thought was really interesting. For example, like the 99.9% systems that we looked at, like as systems become smaller and smaller, you know, in terms of the lines of code that that company is using, but then the OSS portion just balloons out. Yeah, that's like, so people are living the dream now that like in 2,000 lines of code, you can have like a full running, actual useful like web application. It's just incredible. Sorry, I just have to cough for a second. So that, I mean, so but the whole thing here, that there's this sort of dangerous thing happening here from a research point of view, and from a, like, I don't know how to better say it, in that I sort of just grab Jira, point the tool at it, right? It's almost like you throw something under a microscope and you look in the microscope, and then you sort of have framed everything, maybe even without realizing it, right? Your microscope sort of naturally frames your results and your question and your research methodology. So if we go back to the deck here, well, if we were to do this again, you know, that was just Java. What would happen if we decided to include the JavaScript parts of Jira, right? Like we didn't measure a single line of JavaScript just now in that analysis. And so what do you think would happen if we added the JavaScript?
My guess is that the numbers, you know, creep up. Instead of being at 78, it goes up to 85 or 90. But I'm not totally sure, honestly.
I also kind of find it fascinating to think like, You know, like, well, and we talked about taking this paper in this next direction of like, what if we only counted the lines of the libraries that are actually, you know, executed, right? Like, because software engineers these days oversubscribe. That's Daniel's term, right? He always says, oh, they oversubscribe to all the dependencies. Like they just bring in, you know, gigabytes, terabytes, petabytes of dependencies because it doesn't hurt you, right? Well, it does from a security point of view, but from a development, getting the features done, it doesn't hurt you, right? And so there's going to be like just so many, and you see that people always joke, right? Like npm install, right? Like it's like, you know, uh, yeah, exactly. npm install.
Yeah, a tornado. And
Yeah.
I mean, for the most part, it's not even practical to investigate your dependency chain when you do that. It's just like, well, it happened.
But I was thinking of now that you're at Chainguard, we could even like frame this even like, you know, step back even farther in terms of the framing. How about now? So in this case, we've got the base image that we're running our system on.
Yeah.
We've got the additional packages we've added. Then we've got the random shit that we're just throwing in there that aren't even part of our libraries or our applications. So in the case of MergeBase, for example, we have Wildfly. Other people, weirdos, sometimes, you know, will take an upstream version of Postgres or something and patch it and do weird things to it. Well, now what's the OSS percentage now, eh?
I mean, I think this is what containers have done in some ways. This is like the dual-edged sword of software packaging in general. It's really excellent to have more and more abstractions that help with software packaging, whether that's a Python package or an npm module or a container. It provides this very useful building block functionality. But as the building blocks like containers and base images get very, very large, well, that amplifies the exact sort of security issues that you have. Well, not only you just bringing in one Python package, you might be literally bringing in hundreds of packages from who knows what provenance, packaged by what person, who knows when, at what time. And it can be extremely useful as a developer trying to get a Python application running. And you just grab a base image, Python, boom, who knows what's in there, but it all test pass, launch. But now it's, you know, really amplified all those problems that you brought up. You know, you're inheriting lots of potentially security debt.
I have like this terrible habit actually, as just as a user of my computer. I wonder if I can show it off. Just my favorite editor. Oh yeah, I know how I can do this. So my favorite plain text editor, as a software engineer, you need a plain text editor, right? Like it's bread and butter, right?
What are you? Are you a Vim person, a Nano person?
Oh man, like everyone's gonna freak out when I show you guys right now what I am, but I'm sorry, I'm just gonna show you. There's too many of these guys here. Go away. Okay, and then I always do it the wrong way. I should have done container prune first. Oh yeah, okay, good. Okay, so I think I've got an old Debian here, or an Ubuntu. Do I have an Ubuntu? Alpine. Where are you, man? Oh, there, an Ubuntu 21. Okay, so I'm just gonna, I have a little alias for dipping into that and running bash, right? And then, so whenever I get my new computer, my brand new fresh computer that I'm going to be working on, sorry. Here I am, I'm root. This is the first thing I typed. So are you ready? Are you ready? It's so embarrassing, man. But it's just, that's been this way for me for 20 years. Oh, I should do the apt-get update first. Oh, you don't have internet. Wow. Do you not have internet?
Oh gosh.
Are you seeing? Well, you have internet, but you don't have. I'll just do the latest. Okay. Sorry about this.
Just go for it. Download stuff.
This should be fine, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, are you going to be able to update yourself, Mr. Ubuntu latest? Yay, much better, much happier, right? And so I have my brand new Ubuntu machine. I'm like, oh, I need a plain text editor. Here it goes. Have you guys heard of this?
Oh, I don't even know, Kate. You're more OG than I am. I'm sorry.
It's the plain text editor that comes with, as you can tell by its first letter, KDE. I don't use KDE for anything except this one plain text editor. Watch what it brings down. It brings down 656 megabytes.
Why do you like it so much? What does it do for you?
Kate, it's just a really basic, editor, but I just like the line numbers, the search and replace. I'm just like,
Okay.
you know how it is. You have your thing that
Yeah,
you're just
yeah, everyone's
comfortable
got their
with.
grooves. You get your grooves with your computer and you're stuck in them, and switching to different grooves would be painful. I get it.
Yeah, and then and then the Emacs people make fun of you, and the Vim people make fun of you. They're all just disgusted, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it's really this. Yeah,
but yeah, look at all that, just for a plain text editor.
yeah. Well, I admire your devotion to this plain text editor.
I'm just a dinosaur, right? Like, for me, when I first started using like relational databases, that was a big jump. Before there, I was like, file system's good enough, right? Um, anyway, yeah, so there's Kate, sort of this is from my own life, like this is real. All this extra stuff just brought onto my computer just because I like this one plain text editor. So there you
And you
go.
read the source code for all of those, right?
Yeah, I run all these scanners against all of them.
Of
Yeah.
course, yeah, yeah.
And I hire secure coding auditors to come, and it's been costing me millions a year, this plain
Yeah,
text editor.
good.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, so I think it's natural. I mean, right, like I'm really excited by our future work, hey, where we're going to actually consider the lines of code that are actually executed, because there's incredible opportunities here for shrinking, right, and for attack surface reduction.
Yeah, I've heard it called tree shaking. You shake the trees, and so that presumably the leaves that aren't being used or somehow dead fall off.
Yeah, perfect. Are you guys doing anything on that, on this, like slimming things down, shrinking things? I know there's some weird tools, like sort of evil, not evil, but just sort of perverted tools in a way for shrinking images, right?
Yeah, I think I think there's a couple different philosophies. Let me describe two, and I'm making this up. I don't have a little philosophical handbook with these philosophies written out, but I think there's a start small school of thought, and there's a separate thought which is status quo, but after the fact, get as small as you can. And I think there are merits to both, but the tooling that Chainguard has become associated with, really two tools, one called APKO and another called Melange, that are for building slimmed down images. They're really in the in the start
Start
small philosophy.
small. Start small.
Yeah. I think there is certainly lots of engineering and interesting ideas to shake the trees, but in some ways, I think it's easier to start by just having a minimal image to begin with, so you don't have to have sophisticated optimizations to get rid of what you don't need.
Yeah, at MergeBase we actually do have like a tree shaking thing, but it's more in the library side of things, not in the, okay, this next slide is kind of good for that too, just to talk about like where are these scanners scanning. And my sense of the industry right now is that you've got the container scanners, and they're able to look at the base image and any additional packages that you've installed through package management, right? So those two layers right at the bottom there. That's always key, right? Like you want to stay in package management as much as you can. Although with what you're saying, with this like start small, you want to stay in package management, but you still want to only grab the bare minimum
That's
of what you need. So don't do apk add Kate, because that's going to bring in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, unless you really need it. And I think another thing that has happened is there's Alpine lattice is obviously a very minimal image, but there are many other moments. Let's say you're doing something with Python, like I brought up, where it's very easy to choose a base image that's from our security perspective, bloated, large, because it just has the functionality you need it, and it has lots of other additional functionality that you don't need, but you just grab it because it's a open source, easy to
Yeah,
use.
you want to get up and running quick, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'm guilty of this, and so even our own tooling has this APKO tool especially has helped me go from. There's one example I built an application recently that the base image had 50 vulns in it, but my test passed, so I was kind of ready to go.
Oh yeah,
And
your
when,
unit tests, your integration tests, yeah.
and it's really a data collection app, and but I realized there's a way to build it with APKO where we got exactly what we need, and there are no vulns. But it took an investment of time. It's not as simple as just just grabbing it off Docker.
Oh, wild. And APKO was the part of the solution there. Yeah, I'm curious to actually learn more about that and try that myself. Yeah.
APKO is neat. It's a way to declare what you want in your image in a YAML format. So it's nice. It has a very what happens in a base image is you kind of just get what's there.
Yeah.
And you can go build on it, but there could be a lot of things buried in layers that you don't want. Well, what if you start fresh and in declare exactly what you want and no more. And so that's what it's allowing you to do. And it uses APKs, which is the packaging format associated with Alpine.
Oh,
so what happens? Go on.
To me, almost in my mind, I'm thinking here as I'm just tracking what you're saying, is it's almost saying like, well, okay, you have a base image which has all this stuff, but based on the APKO requests that you've made, it looks like we don't need all of this stuff that would normally be in the base image. So we're going to, not bring it in since you don't need it.
Exactly. What you're really doing is just creating exactly what your application needs, which is different than what's available. You saw this just a second ago. You were able to hop in to Ubuntu because there's a command line interpreter, right? You were able to go to Bash. Well, when you deploy your web app, in fact, you might not want Bash.
Yeah.
You might not want another person, or whether it's a meddling colleague or an attacker, to be able to get to a command line. Well, with Ubuntu right now, I guess you could probably do something sophisticated like uninstall it, but realistically, that's going to create complications. So what the whole idea is to start from a minimal container image, in the similar spirit of Alpine, or if you know the Google Container Tools distro list project. But it uses this tooling called APKO to do it.
You're kind of blowing my mind here. I didn't expect to get my mind blown on the webinar, but because
it changes your mindset. I think for me, I haven't been a dyed-in-the-wool container tools expert for the last 10 years. I wasn't on the first wave of Docker users and one of the early Kubernetes power users. But I think I very much saw myself as a Docker consumer. I go to Docker Hub, I look for containers that fit my needs. If I find one that's good enough, has enough of the stuff I want, and I can just Docker install it, I'm a happy guy. But I think the problem that has emerged, and these, you're bringing this up by bringing up scanning, is that it's very easy to do that and have unpleasant side effects.
Yeah.
Have packages you don't want that oftentimes have vulnerabilities that you don't want to deal with. And it's not literally just because you're afraid of getting your web application owned, but you don't want to have to deal with the management and overhead time of accounting for and dealing with those vulnerabilities. So this changed the perspective. It says, well, can I build my container image that's minimal from the beginning, so that I'm not simply a consumer that goes to Docker Hub, but I'm really a creator of container images. And that's really the mindset that requires changing, which it was hard for me to accept that at first, because I want to treat it just like the App Store. And but this actually opens up more possibilities, but now you have to become responsible for thinking about what you need in your container.
Yeah, I'm trying to like put together like a mental model for what the change is, and I'm kind of feeling like, so like, this approach, base image and layering on top, right? So you have your base image and then you do your APK add. And I mean, I can show in the MergeBase file itself. Oops, bye-bye, Kate. It's the fun of Docker. It all got deleted. But here's the MergeBase, one of the MergeBase Docker files for our own infrastructure. Right. And so, yeah, we take this Alpine latest and then we add a bunch of stuff that, we need to run our system, and also that we need to sort of jump onto our system and
yeah, and this is very reasonable. I think, I mean, you made a number of sensible decisions. I mean, Alpine's a great project and was minimal and didn't bring in that much. And then, it's not like you're bringing in tons of stuff. Those are all sensible things. Of course, your application does have Bash now. So when you deploy it, it's got Bash in there. But
yeah, but so we're using this layering model, oh, here's all the things we get, and then we'll put more things on top of it, and then we're going to go and put more things on top of that. Whereas I feel like the way you're describing APKO, which I have not tried, but just the way this information is getting transmitted to me here over this webinar, it's almost like you're taking a fishing line, right? And you're sort of throwing your fishing line into the universe of APK packages, and it'd be neat, right? Like if I wanted curl, like, and let's say, or I just wanted these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I take in these 8 ones, or no, there's 7, sorry. And then I'm saying, okay, I'm going to throw in, 7 fishing lines, fishing hooks, and I'm going to pull them out. And they're going to bring their sub dependencies that they require, and that's all we're going to get. And we're not, we're not going to have a base image that we're building on top of.
That's right. There's no from line. Because, I mean, obviously Alpine latest, you're choosing a relatively minimal one, but there are many other options where perhaps, you have, you're potentially pulling in, like we've discussed, dozens or hundreds of packages. And if that's the case, well, gosh, you don't want to deal with that. So it's better to just start small.
Yeah, and this APK approach, I presume then it's always like that. It's always like, well, these are the 7 I want, whatever the base image is. Like this is the universe of packages. Because I mean, that's fundamentally what I'm saying here is I'm saying, well, I want this universe of packages. And from this universe of packages,
for a set of packages,
I want these 7 to be available with all their, whatever they need. That's all I actually want. Yeah, it's wild, eh? It's a very subtle change to the way you're sort of asking for what you need, right? And yet, but it's a powerful.
Really trained us is one way I think of it, and in a very powerful way. But they've trained me as a user to see from X. I need to start somewhere, and that is not a law of the universe. It was simply a sensible convention and an approach. But I think there are others.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, John Speed. Yeah, I'm grateful.
Well, thanks for going on this digression with me. I think it's you and I are both related in this idea that packages are very powerful, but they have downsides too.
Yeah, because we always oversubscribe, right? Like,
right.
And so, but yeah, what you've articulated there is a powerful change. It's not a silver bullet, right? You're still going to subscribe.
No, you still have to have trust in those packages. You're not good to go.
Yeah, and they're still going to oversubscribe, but at least you've eliminated one avenue of oversubscription, right? Of taking more dependencies than you actually need.
Yeah.
On the tree shaking side, I mean, we do offer that for Java at MergeBase, where we literally rewrite all the jar files on the system. So you shut down your system, and then you can run MergeBase in this special, like, runtime mode. We call it inoculate all the jars. Most of our customers just use this for SCA. They don't use this runtime inoculation mode. And then once all the jars are rewritten, the idea was that they could become sort of self-aware, self-reporting, self-monitoring. And then because now you have this instrumentation of all your libraries that are in your system, you can keep track of like, well, what jars are actually being used, right? Yeah, I mean, I can show a little snapshot of that. But this other approach, this tree shaking approach. It's kind of neat how these approaches, they work at the, at the, what would you call it, the package level, or they work at the library level. Like either way, right? You're just bringing in code that you need to run your stuff. Here, I'll just
Yeah.
quickly jump over to that, just show a very quick demo of that. Ah. So we're running that live monitoring there of we took a struts and we a struts application running on Tomcat, and we preceded it with vulnerable versions of the struts library. And so, but it's that it's been running all day today and yesterday, and then because of this, right, we actually have like how many times was this library entered in the last 24 hours, right? And what's nice about this, right, is you can go by usage, and then you can be like, oh, well, some of these libraries, they're sitting on the file system, but they were never even loaded, right? Like they were never, no execution never entered that library. Java was never asked to even load that library, right? And so these suddenly become a nice avenue for reducing vulnerabilities, known vulnerabilities in your system, and shrinking your attack surface. Right? It's just another approach. The problem though with just ripping all these libraries out right out of the gates. This one's such a funny example, the commons file upload. Because it's present, a very bad attack becomes possible because it just is like, oh, there's that library. I'm going to use that as part of my attack. Yay. Right. And so then if you remove that library, the attack doesn't become possible. But if you are attacked, then you start seeing call counts, right? This number here, if I did the attack, I can do the attack. The call count will go up to 6. So then, so you see there's two problems here, which is one, using the usage of the library, is it used or not? If you're being actively attacked, well, then you're getting an inaccurate picture because your system actually doesn't use the library, but because you're being actively attacked, the library is being used. So that's one wrinkle. But the other wrinkle is, I was thinking this, what if you have like some month-end process, right? And you just haven't been, you have some weird month-end report that your Jira needs to generate, and that part of Jira, and you click on that button, and that button only gets clicked once a month. So if you come in here and you're trying to shrink your system down, but
you overshrink it.
Yeah, you overshrink, exactly, because you're not going to capture that special month-end process.
Yeah, this seems to be a core problem in general of understanding and reasoning about applications. Executing the right code paths is a very difficult problem. It's hard to know what code paths are quote normal and not.
Not malicious, so, yeah. Oh, whoops, wrong button. And then, oh yeah, and then this was the other thing I was going to ask you about, which is like it's my understanding right now, like this server here, this box at the bottom, is essentially the image. And it does have the JavaScript library sitting on it. They just get copied over to the browser. So I only mention the browser here because the JavaScript libraries run in the browser, but they're still sitting in the server. But container scanners right now, they really only look at the base image and the packages, is my understanding, right?
I think there's a wide variety of scanners, but in general, I'm willing to stand with you that it seems most scanners. That's not quite a scientific statement, but yeah, you are using these package managers to check what's there. If you have you have something like weird random shit app requires that didn't come from package management. Yeah, you're right. That stuff will be overlooked.
Often overlooked. Yeah,
exactly.
The people that are on the call here on the webinar, if you are evaluating container scanners, this is a fun thing you can do. If we go back to this guy, no, yeah. So I was in there. I have an image that, what was it called? Oh yeah, step 3 there. So what I do, is it Ash? Yeah, you're allowed to use Ash. So what I do is I just, for fun, is I just put like this, JSCH013 jar. If you take this jar file, I got one CVE in it, right? So this version of JSCH has one CVE in it. I just huck it into the base image, into my Docker image. And so I have this nice Docker image called container scanning step 3. And then I just, run every container scanner I can against it. Like, can you find this? Can you find this little vulnerable jar that I've stuck on the file system here? And yeah, I've been disappointed with the results. I mean, you can see I was doing this experiment like around 2 years ago, so I should do it again and see what happens. But yeah, I encourage everyone to do that. Like if you're ever looking at a scanner, picking on a scanner, definitely like put together really simple scenarios and see how the scanner copes with it. Does it find, what you expect it to find? Yeah, and then my sense is there is a gap here. To kind of go into what our 2 companies are doing, right? So I was sort of thinking, so you guys have your secure images, right? They're Chainguard secure images product that people can take, right? So it's kind of like, this, right? Like you're just grabbing the pizza crust, and then the developers, the engineers are gonna, they need to make pizza. They're gonna customize it the way they need. But you can get a nice secure pizza crust, a base.
Yeah, exactly.
To build on top of. And then on the MergeBase side, right? Like you see that little picture of the tomatoes and the garlic and the cheese there, right? So what we do is we essentially do known vulnerability, like parts recall, like, oh, warning, oh, it turns out those tomatoes, that particular version of that tomato has a very serious bug in it. So MergeBase comes in and sort of scans the toppings to tell you, right? And so here's sort of the metaphor there, right? The romaine lettuces that sometimes have E. coli. So that's where MergeBase comes in. But then it was funny, right? Because you were telling me about Chainguard has this Chainguard Enforce as well. And so, look at this. I actually found that.
Yeah, so but Enforce is really at the other end. You're totally right. Base images, you're starting with the pizza crust, but Enforce is for Kubernetes. You're running a cluster, and what you're really happening is images, kind of these cooked images. You're right, pizzas are coming into your home. The metaphor falls apart again a little bit, but I guess you're eating the pizzas, so your body.
Well, I was thinking like the delivery guy. The delivery guy can't tamper with the pizza, right? Like the pizza is put in the box and it's put in the car of the delivery guy, but the delivery guy or woman, man or woman.
Yeah, I guess it's like the tamper evident. I don't know if pizza boxes even do that. I haven't ordered.
Oh, this is a tamper-proof pizza box. I think they probably patented it.
Okay, wow. So there you go. Tamper-proof pizza boxes. If you really are worried about someone tampering your pizza, I think Enforce is an applicable metaphor. And what it really does is allows you to describe a set of software supply chain security policies for the images that go into your Kubernetes cluster, and then to enforce it. And this is exactly like you allude to. This is something like, for instance, a digital signature that you can do with projects like SigStore, where there's a way to make sure that the integrity of your image or your pizza hasn't been tampered with, or hasn't been maliciously changed. So that's what Enforce does. And it's a customizable set of policies, but all related to the integrity and the software supply chain security practices of your Kubernetes cluster.
moving forward here, yeah, I was just like sort of philosophical question, because you're actually more of a researcher just on software supply chain, right? You're
That's
in
right.
general, right?
I
Yeah,
guess we all are these days. I mean, it's become such a pressing topic. It's, even as someone like myself and who really care about it, I certainly acknowledge there's a wide range of perspectives and expertise at this point. We've built this world where we all depend upon npm and Maven and Debian, Ubuntu, Apache, etc. And yet, in some ways, some of the core security aspects of it, at least potentially, don't meet broad societal expectations.
hmm or needs, right? Like I mean, I don't know if society even knows they have expectations. Oh, you've gone silent.
Yeah, only vaguely. I think this
Yeah.
is why. How about now?
Oh, perfect.
Still good?
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. Only vaguely, and this is like many broad, social topics. I really do consider software supply chain security a public topic and not just for the specialists. Is that it's hard to figure actually what what does the government need in terms of software
Yeah,
supply.
yeah. And now like governments are actually demanding secure software supply chains and demanding secure software. But
Yeah,
but what do they mean? Do they even know what they mean?
I think it's I mean, in fairness to governments and companies, I mean, I think if you grab 5 software supply chain security experts with air quotes, I think you get 10 opinions. And just in government right now, I mean, I think there's a lot of heterogeneity, and there's certainly some very mature parties, and some parties that are have relatively less expertise in history, but it's kind of a bit of a melee right now, and lots of parties are trying to come up with a sensible set of
I
steps.
feel like, yeah, I feel like there's urgency now, but it's a bit chaotic. But at least
Chaotic.
everyone is aligned. Yeah, we're all working in the right direction. But yeah, it's a bit chaotic. Log4j kind of might have been a help there, a real
Yeah,
impetus.
yeah. I think Log4j really crystallized. Was so widespread, so easily exploitable. Um, it made the topic of open source software security tangible in a way that even Heartbleed, I suppose, maybe hadn't. So
Mm. Well, and yeah, yeah. Although Heartbleed was huge,
Heartbleed's big, you would think, but gosh, clear. In some ways, I think these issues are just recurring ones. There will never be a solution. There will simply be different, stages of coping with widespread dependence on open source software and all software.
of these three, I mean, and software can come from even more stuff. Of these three categories of sort of sources of software, um, which of these I think would worries you the most?
Probably, if I had to choose one, I think I can say that for me personally, I'm most worried about the repos compared to the distros and upstreams. Though, I mean, it depends though each of those are themselves very diverse.
Yeah,
But distros like Debian, and we referred to this earlier, or Ubuntu, in some ways those are relatively um, those are communities with history and shared norms,
shared
security,
goals. Yeah.
shared goals, understanding about security, really deep expertise. And same with just take the Apache Software Foundation. It depends what we mean by upstreams there. If that's like all of GitHub, that's one thing. I'm not
Yeah,
willing to.
yeah, and Apache is a very diverse group, actually.
Yeah, Apache's a diverse group, but once again, I think in general, you find people and organizations with expertise and skill and mutual understanding, and the repos, though, I guess repositories, registries, and this is also a very diverse group. But I think one thing that the those are closer to just, quote, GitHub in some ways. It's extremely diverse, many different parties.
Well, and they're always hoping to, like, no, I don't know if that's the right word, but they're that network effect, where the more people that use it, the more useful it is, the better it is, the more likely they can somehow turn it into a business model or something, right? Like, so I feel like they're sort of incentivized to have very low barrier to entry, right?
That's right. I mean, they prioritize convenience, and they are not those. I mean, if you did like some sort of network analysis of the people involved with them, the other ones, Apache, Debian, Ubuntu, Alpine, those are very small interlinked networks, I would think. These people know each other, they've worked with each other. The NPM is not like that, and it just can't be. I mean, it's just a whole different philosophy. It's about there being millions of packages, and everybody and their friend now is an NPM maintainer.
I mean, I think the repos have gotten a bit better lately, but
Sure.
yeah, I agree with you. I mean, if I were to rank the three of these, I'm like most nervous. And I mean, like, it's sort of weird to say nervous because it's not like I do anything about it. But I still,
Only very directly. Yeah, if you want to be a repo superhero, you're probably mainly going to be wasting your time.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm still, doing Maven install and npm install and just not looking, I'm not auditing those line by line or anything. But, just in the back of my mind, in terms of like, well, where is this system, I guess, most fragile? I feel the repos is in first place. And then the upstreams are obviously going to always be a source of fragility, just naturally, right? Like, random person makes a useful thing. Oh, maybe that random person is malicious, right? Like, you just, and then the distros, because they sort of they're like, checks that require two signatures, they're always going to be more secure, right? Like, you
Yeah,
need to be invited in as a package maintainer. And
exactly.
then the fact that you then you're finding an upstream and you're saying, oh, this upstream is interesting, let's bring it into our system, right? There's just a bit more vetting, auditing, reviewing. There's even like social forces that are going into play. The upstream has to be important enough that Debian or Alpine would even care to bring it in, right? So
Yeah.
there's so much more friction there, and yeah, it just feels like, checks with two signatures required instead of one signature. Final question for you: if you were to attack the software supply chain for criminal profit, yeah, how would you do it?
Yeah, so I thought about this earlier. You gave me a small head start before the meeting to think about this, and I have answers that are surprisingly close to each other, which I think means that I have excessively grandiose ambitions for my small side project. Which is okay. Let me start with a little background myself. I'm really a public policy researcher by training, and a lot of my research before software security was on the Chinese military. Um,
Here.
and it turns out to be very hard to study the Chinese military in open, easily accessible sources because, like many militaries and like the Chinese Communist Party in general, it's closed off. There aren't many publicly accessible records. It's possible, but to piece things together, and it's difficult. So, in a very selfish way, I wish that there were ways to get access to the email records and internal discussions with the Chinese military. It's illegal and unethical, and I wouldn't do it. But if I'm put on the spot in a webinar to discuss a small project as a grad student, man, it'd be interesting to try to figure out what apps and software applications are being used by Chinese military personnel, and try to get into that distribution system so that you can steal their internal records for your nerdy graduate student research purposes. But then that begs the larger question. It's like, okay, well, how easy is that as a side project? Probably not that easy, but I mean, really, intelligence agencies already think like this. Some of the biggest software supply chain attacks are actually linked to states. You could even think of Stuxnet in some
Yeah,
ways, a software supply chain attack.
absolutely.
Um, but clearly, I think one thing that's interesting about trying to get into, let's say Chinese government systems, for instance, is I've read, though I don't know this to be true, but that there's a lot of outdated old Microsoft systems. And I would think that there are probably ways to tamper with and play havoc with all the old update systems that are associated with those systems. So
okay, with like the hot patching sort of like the updates that are coming in to old like Windows 2000, Windows XP, Windows 8. Yeah.
That seems like the sort of thing that's going to be less, in the spectrum of big hacks that are doable. Figuring out how to tamper with the update systems of very old Microsoft machines, which if you think they are widespread in the Chinese government, not like I said, this is illegal, unethical. I'm not recommending.
Yeah, of course. No, it was more meant like, yeah, if you were the bad guy, right? A sort of a little tabletop exercise. Me personally, I think I would just I loved Event Stream, like as an attack. Do you remember Event Stream attack?
I remember Event Stream. It makes me terrified of NPM.
Yeah. And for those on the call that don't remember, aren't familiar, Event Stream was a very highly used JavaScript library, NPM library, kind of like left pad in a way, and but it was very low in the dependency tree, right? And so it's sort of like some popular. I mean, these NPM libraries, it's like trying to write a Billboard top 10 hit, right? Like you never know. You put, like a left pad, like who would have thought left pad would become a Billboard top 10 hit,
it's like way less lucrative though than real top 10 hits, but sorry, that's
big. Well, this discussion is about making it more lucrative, right? But I think that's the way I would go, because so you find, and the beautiful thing about the event stream attack is that they find a very popular library that nobody knows is popular. Nobody knows they're depending on it because it's too far down in the tree. And then you just become friends with the person. You're just like, you're answering issues on the GitHub, you're adding documentation to the wiki. Like, if I'm an open source maintainer and I have like, a dozen different open source libraries that I'm maintaining, and people are grumpy and no one's nice to me, and then someone sends me like a case of beer and a bouquet of flowers and like, Uber eats some like food to my house or something, like boom, I'm like, you're talking like for $50, I'm like, sure, yeah, you can have commit, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. That's actually a very practical way to go. The question is, but they were trying
how do you then leverage it, right?
Yeah, exactly. They were trying to steal Bitcoin wallets, or I guess passwords.
Some sort of cryptocurrency wallet, yeah.
What would you do to make money from it? Even I'm a little confused about how to do that exactly.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're executing on browsers, right? So your code is going to execute on thousands, 10,000s, millions of browsers. So if you can run code on a million browsers and you don't know what those browsers are, where they are, who they belong to, I mean, that's the next step. And maybe that's a very tricky step. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess, if you can steal information arbitrarily from browsers.
I think we should team up as bad guys, fictional bad guys.
Okay, I think we've got our next mining software repositories project.
Well, I was just like some of those
information from a million browsers and what we did with it.
It's perfect. Yeah. So I mean, just for everyone on the call, we would never do anything like that. It's all just a tabletop. Well, John Speed, this was a lovely conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Julius, for including me. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here.
And yeah, everyone, so sorry about the mishap yesterday with the bad scheduling, and have a great rest of your day. Have a great Thursday, everyone. And I forgot the next steps slide. It's just, try Chainguard dev, try MergeBase.com, of course. And yeah, I'm going to do another webinar in about a month, October 26th. We're just going to like talk about scanners with Jim Manico. Okay, thanks everyone. I'm going to end the webinar now. So have a great rest of your Thursday.